She stood in the narrow alley just as the sun slipped behind the city's concrete skyline, holding a small velvet pouch in trembling hands, knowing that once she let it go, there would be nothing left to sell, nothing left to remember. Hunger had a way of stripping life down to its rawest truth, and tonight, it had brought her here, to a place where dignity was quietly exchanged for survival. Before the story continues, if you believe that kindness still exists in this world, that second chances can change lives, and that compassion matters more than wealth, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Her name was Alina. She was 27, though hunger and exhaustion made her look older, as if life had pressed too hard too early. The city around her pulsed with noise and lights, restaurants glowing with warm promise, people laughing over meals she could only smell. For weeks, she had survived on scraps, stale bread, and water. Tonight, even that had run out. Her stomach burned with a dull, constant ache, and her legs felt weak beneath her worn shoes. She had tried everything she could think of. She cleaned offices at night until her employer disappeared without paying. She sold her clothes one by one, then her old phone, then the last kitchen utensils from her tiny rented room. All that remained was the treasure in her hand. The velvet pouch was soft and frayed at the edges. Inside it rested a simple gold locket, its surface scratched by time but polished daily by care. It was the only thing her mother had left her. Inside the locket was a faded photograph of two smiling women standing in front of a small house that no longer existed. Her mother had given it to her the night she died, pressing it into Alina's palm and telling her that some things were worth more than money. Alina had believed that once. Tonight, belief did not fill an empty stomach. She stepped into a small pawn shop tucked between a closed tailor and a flickering convenience store. The bell above the door rang weakly, and the shop smelled of dust, old metal, and quiet desperation. The man behind the counter barely looked up. He weighed the locket in his hand, inspected it with bored eyes, and named a price so low it felt like an insult. Alina nodded anyway. She did not argue. Pride had already been swallowed by hunger. When the locket left her hands, a sharp pain cut through her chest, deeper than the ache in her body. She walked out with a few crumpled bills and the knowledge that a chapter of her life had ended forever. Across the street, unseen by her, a black luxury car waited at the traffic light. Inside sat Daniel Rothman, a billionaire known for his ruthless business instincts and cold precision. He had built an empire from nothing, or so the magazines said, though they never mentioned the years of loneliness, the sacrifices, or the quiet guilt that followed success. He was on his way back from inspecting one of his redevelopment projects, another block of old buildings scheduled to be erased and replaced with glass and steel. He stared absently out the window, lost in thought, until he noticed her. There was something about the way she walked out of the pawn shop that caught his attention. Not desperation alone, because he had seen that many times. It was the way she paused on the sidewalk, clutching the bills in her hand as if they burned her, her shoulders slightly hunched, her eyes fixed on the ground. She looked like someone who had just buried something precious. Daniel felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest. He watched as she crossed the street and entered a small grocery store, one of the kind that sold discounted goods and expired cans. Curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, compelled him to follow. He told his driver to wait and stepped out into the evening air, the sounds of the city washing over him. Inside the store, he kept his distance, pretending to examine shelves while watching her reflection in the glass freezer doors. She moved carefully, counting every coin, choosing the cheapest items. A loaf of bread, a small bag of rice, a can of soup, nothing more. When she reached the counter, she hesitated, then quietly removed one item, realizing she could not afford it all. The cashier barely noticed. Daniel had spent billions without blinking. He had negotiated deals that displaced hundreds of families. Yet something about this small, silent moment unsettled him more than any boardroom confrontation. As she turned to leave, her gaze briefly lifted, and their eyes met. It was only a second, but in that instant, Daniel saw something that stunned him. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no resentment, only a quiet, aching dignity, and beneath it, a resilience that felt almost defiant. She did not look at him as a savior or an enemy. She looked at him as another human passing through the same world. She left the store and disappeared into the crowd. Daniel stood frozen, the image burned into his mind. For reasons he could not explain, he followed her at a distance as she walked several blocks, past bright cafes and luxury apartments, into a quieter neighborhood where the buildings grew older and the streetlights dimmer. She stopped in front of a narrow building with peeling paint and a broken intercom. Inside, her room was small and cold, furnished with little more than a mattress, a chair, and a table. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and allowed herself to cry for the first time that day, clutching the grocery bag as if it were a victory and a defeat all at once. Daniel did not follow her inside. He stood across the street, feeling foolish and intrusive. Yet he could not leave. The encounter had stirred memories he had buried long ago. He remembered his own mother skipping meals so he could eat, selling her wedding ring to pay rent, telling him stories about hope while hiding her fear. He remembered how the world had looked when he had nothing, and how easy it had become to forget that feeling once he had everything. That night, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He instructed his team to investigate the area, not for redevelopment, but for support. He learned about the abandoned community center nearby, about the people struggling quietly, invisible to the rest of the city. And he learned about Alina, her history, her education cut short by her mother's illness, her attempts to work, to survive honestly. The locket she had sold that evening appeared in the pawn shop records, described as sentimental jewelry with minimal market value. That detail haunted him. Days passed. Alina rationed her food carefully, each meal small and measured. She searched for work relentlessly, walking until her feet blistered, accepting rejections with a nod and a forced smile. She did not know that someone was watching from afar, that a chain of events had been set in motion by one quiet moment in a grocery store. One afternoon, she received a letter slipped under her door, informing her that she had been selected for a community assistance program offering temporary work and housing support. She was suspicious at first. Nothing like this had ever come without a catch. Still, desperation pushed her forward. She attended the meeting at the old community center, now freshly cleaned and bustling with activity. Volunteers smiled, offered warm drinks, spoke with genuine interest. Alina felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her. Hope, fragile but present. What she did not know was that Daniel stood at the back of the room, unnoticed, watching as she listened attentively, as she asked thoughtful questions, as she volunteered to help organize supplies even before securing her own position. He saw again what had stunned him before. Not her poverty, but her character. Not her need, but her willingness to give even when she had nothing. Weeks turned into months. Alina worked tirelessly, helping coordinate food distribution, assisting children with homework, cleaning and repairing the center. Her reliability and quiet leadership did not go unnoticed. Opportunities followed. A stable job, a modest apartment. Slowly, the constant tension in her body eased. She slept through the night. She ate without counting every bite. Yet the absence of the locket remained a silent ache, a reminder of what she had lost to survive. One evening, as the center celebrated its reopening with a small gathering, Daniel finally approached her. He introduced himself simply, without titles or explanations. They spoke about the work, about the community, about the resilience of people who were often overlooked. He listened more than he spoke. Before leaving, he handed her a small box, saying only that it was something he believed belonged with her. Alina opened it later, alone, her hands shaking. Inside lay the gold locket, her breath caught, tears blurring her vision. It was unmistakably hers, every scratch familiar. In that moment, the weight of the past months crashed over her, and she understood that someone had truly seen her, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worth honoring. As this story nears its end, if it has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps spread stories of hope, kindness, and humanity to people who may need them most. Before the final moments, we have a special request. Please comment below with the word hope if you believe that even in the darkest moments, life can still surprise us with light. Alina never became wealthy, and Daniel never claimed credit for what he had done. Their lives moved forward on separate paths, connected by a single, silent understanding. She continued her work, now with confidence and purpose, helping others who stood where she once had, at the edge of despair. He continued his business but with a changed perspective, choosing projects that rebuilt rather than erased, that lifted rather than displaced. The city remained loud and restless, indifferent in many ways. Yet within it, small acts of kindness created ripples that could not be measured by money or headlines. A woman who sold her only treasure to survive found herself richer in ways she never imagined. A billionaire who thought he had seen everything discovered that true value often appears in the quietest moments, in the eyes of someone who refuses to lose their humanity. And somewhere, in a small room filled with light, a gold locket rested against a heart that had endured, reminding us all that even when we are forced to let go of what we cherish most, life has a way of returning it, transformed, when we least expect it.